Yeah, buddy. Let's go. We are coming to you live, folks, from Studio K, presented by Circle K. Appreciate everyone joining us here on the PHNX Rising podcast. Listen, there's really no two ways to say it. It's been quite a couple days, Owen.
Just a bit, yeah.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, for those of you who are joining us, either for the first time or first time maybe in a while, given all the recent news, I am Max Simpson, joined by Owen Evans. Listen, guys, typically on the Tuesday or the first show after the weekend matches, we're usually going to, break down the match, talk a little bit through the tactics, everything like that. It's going to be a little bit of a different pod today. We just have, just a little bit of news that's happened since then. So we're going to walk you all through it. There's a lot of layers to what we have going on, and we're going to do our best to kind of bring that to you. But I mean, Owen, kind of first off, right, kind of setting the scene for what we're talking about today, right? You've had, your kind of interview that's posted on PHNX Sports YouTube, interviewing with Phoenix Rising president Bobby Dulle, your whole conversation with him, kind of getting his thoughts on everything that's happened, both from, Danny Stone parting ways with him, kind of state of the club. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into everything else. But really just from the onset, it's been a couple days. Match was on Friday. Got the news of Danny Stone parting ways on Saturday. How are we kind of sitting with everything?
I feel as though, again, it goes back to, and we said this pretty much immediately in the aftermath of this. This was something we knew there was pressure. We knew there was pressure on him. We knew that there was concern from ownership around the way that, results were going, the way that things were going on the field. I didn't expect it to come so quickly, though. And a large part of that, I think we're seeing it right now, right? We know that the team is kind of thinking a little bit about what they're going to do in terms of the head coach role. Obviously, if you wait another week, then you have a 2-week window to be able to do that. I think that was when we were all kind of prodding in the direction of maybe 2 losses gets him to that point whereby after San Antonio it comes. In the end, it comes after Memphis. And it's a little bit surprising, just the timing, but again, just knowing, and we have to be frank here, there wasn't always the support that he needed, to be honest, in the locker room. The results obviously weren't going in a positive direction. Those kind of factors don't help. Now, how much of it is the fact that he had, to an extent, a hand tied behind his back, I think, by certain decisions that had been made over the course of the season, over the course of the previous offseason? I'm not sure. But there's definitely elements in there.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of go along with what you're saying of like, right, you have, talked to Danny Stone after like every single one of these matches. You're kind of hearing it from, what he's said to you and kind of how it's come across. And like, right, was there possibly, given if the results kept going the ways that they have, there could be something afoot, there could be danger, his role in jeopardy? Sure. Like you can make that case purely based on just how the season's gone. But to your point, it's maybe not this soon, and maybe just kind of the timing of how everything happened. It maybe was, anywhere from maybe a week early, a couple weeks early. There's, you can kind of make your own timeline. But I think really what we've seen since then is, and we're going to get in this a little bit further, we have just seen, I think, the buildup of a lot of frustration from the fan base. This season, by many accounts, by almost all accounts,
it's because it's not as simple as just a team underperforming.
And then that's just it. By all accounts, this season, while they have been underperforming, I think a lot of where the fan frustration has been is maybe not as much in how the team on field has been performing from the head coaching standpoint, but really where the responsibility lies. We're going to get into that a little bit further, but I think really it's good to kind of set the scene from you had your discussion with Bobby Dulle, as previously mentioned. Talk us through kind of, right, what he mentioned to you about, his decision to part ways with Danny Stone.
Well, for a starter, just to kind of put this in the bit more of the perspective here, it wasn't like a decision that came from him alone.
Right.
The comments that he made to me suggested this was something that kind of came at all levels, right? In terms of Bobby, in terms of Brandon McCarthy as the sporting director, in terms of ownership at large, and the board and all of those different stakeholders knew that they felt they had to do something. Bobby did tell me that this was a unanimous decision in the end. And he also did give reasons for that decision. We might have a listen to that now, actually, the first clip from the interview yesterday.
Yeah, we built this team together in the off season, and we wanted this year to be a continuation of the project from last year. And we discussed in the off season how the game model needed to evolve. I mean, with Juan at the time when he was still the head coach, and then obviously in conjunction with Danny, about chance creation. We needed to do a better job of that this year. We needed to get more vertical at times. We were a little pragmatic at times last year. And then ultimately, defensively, our shape with higher pressure, a bit more intensity as well. Just some different intentions at times to get forward. Obviously, as you fast forward to where we're at today, and we certainly get results can be flaky, right? We know that, but based on a number of factors, daily conversations with everyone in and around the team every day, players, staff, the metrics and data, you look at that and ultimately the overall performances, the body of work, and we felt we were actually going backwards. So we felt we lacked an identity, clear direction for the players on what to do on the field, and coupled with the energy and intensity levels that look like they've been dropping, we felt it was the right time to make a decision, and we still have an opportunity left this year to turn it around and get back to what we would hoped we were getting into in the off season.
So you're kind of seeing where Phoenix Rising, it's no secret if you were watching it both from the eye test, from results, from record-wise, this is not the same caliber of team that we saw in the 2023 USL playoffs where they were able to ride hot, they were able to win the entire thing. I think the big thing, right, and we're going to get into recruitment a little bit later on, and I know that's very much a big topic and has a lot to do with where they're at now. But when you're talking with Bobby Dulle, and he's kind of saying the things of like, right, we're not, the players and the team has been underperforming in terms of where we look to be from a, kind of like a fit from that athletic standpoint, from the data standpoint. Did you feel you had a good sense of like where he was coming from?
I mean, look, has this team been doing as well as it perhaps could have been doing? Mm. To be fair, I don't think that it necessarily has been. And that's why this conversation is at times a little bit more nuanced than the reaction has been on social media. However, that doesn't mean that there are other parts of this club that aren't blameless for that. The fact of the matter is that recruitment did play a role in the performance of the team so far. If recruitment didn't play a role in the performance of the team so far, we wouldn't have heard more comments recently about how they are actually going to go back and kind of not follow the original plan on what they were going to do with strikers. They are actually going to look at bringing someone in. That wouldn't be the case, quite frankly, if the recruitment plan as originally planned out had worked. It didn't. And again, we will get onto that more later on. When you mention things like the intensity in games, I think it's... and to not necessarily wanting to put words in Bobby's mouth, but again, also knowing what we've heard, what others have said, it's also worth noting, again, the locker room, we've kind of said it throughout the season, has not been as united as it has been in previous seasons. It's worth remembering first and foremost that Juan Guerra was just an elite man manager. That's who he was. He was a people person of a level that this club probably will not see again. And quite frankly, if they do, they are going to be very lucky. There is a reason that I think that Juan Guerra is on for much bigger and better things. There is a reason that he was poached by an MLS club after previously turning down other MLS clubs and opportunities that came up for him. And to expect a first-year head coach, despite whatever experience they may or may not have, to manage that kind of a locker room filled with egos in a lot of ways as well, when you have someone who admittedly has some good respect in that locker room in Darnell King, but he is a first-year assistant coach. And then you bring in another assistant coach who, in this case, his playing career is, to say the least, lacking. I'm sorry, we'll get into this later because we are about to start talking about Diego shortly. But I'm sorry, I'm not thoroughly convinced by the academy football side for just the idea that that'll generate respect from players. Even if he may or may not be a good football mind, I can't comment on that. I don't know enough to comment on that. Sure. People have told me that he is, but that's a separate question. I just feel like managing that locker room with that kind of group there was always going to be an uphill battle, and comes with, to a degree, some unrealistic expectations. There have been, when you add all those things up, pretty much, you add up the recruitment failures, you add up the backroom staff being a little bit lacking, and I think, just in terms of experience or in terms of respect from players at times, all of those things add up.
Yeah.
It's complex. This isn't straightforward. It's not easy, especially when you have a lot of egos in that locker room. And so, did they do as well as they could have? Maybe, maybe not. But the key thing is that there were some clear warning signs of what was missing from day one. Let's actually be clear on this one, though. Sure. I want to add this one part. I think we said from day one when they hired Danny that realistically you needed to bring in a Spanish coach that would garner a Spanish-speaking coach that would garner the respect of players in that locker room. We said that because, again, we knew there were egos in there.
Sure.
Okay? What they end up with is Diego Gomez. Now, Diego Gomez will be taking this team forward, at least in the interim, presumably for this coming weekend away in San Antonio, presumably at this point, given the words that Bobby had to say about Diego. And let's have a listen to those words now.
First and foremost, Diego's been named the interim. We're excited for Diego. He's got a unique background. He grew up as a youth, as a goalkeeper in the academies at Real Madrid, at Barca. He was the coach of the year last year at the NISA level. So he's been a head coach and had success last year. And so for us, we know he has a very clear vision. I mean, part of the reason that he was brought on board in January is because of the ideas and the way he sees the game, and the principles that he has on the field. So we're excited to see how he implements them here. And meanwhile, we're going to continue, as you can imagine, we've been inundated with names. We're going to conduct interviews with potential candidates, while Diego also has an opportunity here to prove himself. So we're kind of taking a dual path approach at the moment, and we'll conduct interviews, but we're not in a hurry necessarily to bring in a new head coach. We have confidence in Diego. We have confidence in the staff around him. We have confidence in the players as well. And that's the approach we're taking right now.
Obviously, Diego, having been here now for a fair few months as an assistant coach, is a familiar face to the players. But that also means that many of them are going to have already made their mind up over him and what they think about him. In the current climate, do you think it's possible for him to have success here at the club? Absolutely. I mean, an assistant coach's role versus a head coach role is different, right? And so he supporting Danny and he's been fantastic in that role. And so now it's his voice. He's the main voice. He's going to be making decisions on who plays, tactical decisions. Again, the coaching staff, forever, that since I've been here at Rising has always worked together during the week.
Obviously, when it comes down to making personnel decisions or some of the tactical decisions, substitution patterns, those there's feedback from the group, but the head coach ultimately has to make that decision. So this will be an opportunity. It's a new day. Today was the first day back for the group. And I know he's delivering his message, how he wants to implement some things, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I think the players will definitely see a different version of Diego. And Diego, well, obviously he's sad to lose a friend in Danny. He's also really excited for this opportunity, and I think he'll look at things through a different lens, and the players will have to look at him through a different lens as well. And it's everyone's going to have to react and respond, and the quicker that they can do that, I think the quicker that you'll hopefully see some things turn around.
Yeah. So look, just breaking down that, of course, again, club says they are not in a rush at this point to find a new head coach. Understandable to an extent, right? You've parted ways with someone that was here for effectively 6 months. And so the next person you're going in for, do you really want to rush in?
Right.
Or do you want to take the time to make sure you get the right person? Understandable. But I will say this. Look, the second question, these questions didn't come from nowhere. Obviously, we have a lot of contacts in the team. We have a lot of conversations. And when Bobby says that the players will see a new side of Diego, for Diego's sake, I hope that is the case. Because at the very least, there is an element of players, according to multiple people with knowledge of the situation, who are not enamored by Diego, who do not have a whole lot of respect for Diego, who view him as somewhat of a joke. Now, again, he's going to be given an opportunity now to put that aside, maybe. But is it too late? When you have a locker room that is, at this point, I think, mentally not in a particularly good place, and you make a change, and you bring in someone who was already there, the players already will have opinions on, and in many cases, they're not necessarily positive opinions. Is that going to lead to success? And add to that as well, that you effectively say that this person is now in the running for the head coaching role on a permanent basis. Yeah. If you're a player there that isn't particularly enamored by Diego, what performance are we going to see out of them in San Antonio? I don't know. Does this team fall apart on Saturday? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, look, most of these guys, they are competitors. They do care about getting wins. But are they going to be motivated necessarily?
It's a human element, man.
There is a human element, right? Everyone is pretty... You've already... And here's the thing. We can't then deflect from that and say, well, they're not... Well, they're competitors, so they'll do it anyway. When we're also bringing up things like a lack of intensity that's being able to be seen in the games. Because that comes from dissatisfaction, broadly speaking, I think. It comes from, to a degree, dissatisfaction at the club. It comes from... other questions that they have. That wasn't what you see from happy players. And happy players don't play like that. Unhappy players can play like that.
Yeah.
The idea that replacing someone, whether they were popular or not, with another coach that, at least again from some perspectives within that locker room, is not popular, will lead to an increase in the intensity levels, is something that I find somewhat absurd and quite frankly, do not anticipate will happen. They won't fight, I don't think, for Diego. Maybe they fight for something else. Maybe they fight in a different way. But I don't think that, at least in the short term, you'll see a team that is fighting for Diego.
No, very much so. I mean, listen, I think Bobby's comment where it's saying, hey, Diego is very much in the running for this position. Take that for what you will, whether that is viewed as legitimate, whether that's kind of viewed as that's the politically thing to say of, oh, we just appointed this manager and yeah, we're going to give him time, which maybe buys us time. take that for where you will. I'll say this, regardless of even just from an optics standpoint, again, people have their opinion of Danny Stone and apparently how this, entire situation has been handled. Just from an optics standpoint, I don't care if you had the best, another assistant coach who was just the best in the league that was already on your staff. Optically, if you're already moving on from one that was on a short notice kind of type deal, it maybe isn't the best from a pure visuals perspective to then go with another one, like all that said. So that's one point. Second point is, in saying that there's not necessarily going to be a rush on this whole situation, you want to take your time. For sure, you want to make sure you get the right hire after this whole situation. I just kind of said it on the post game on Friday. If you kind of are going into the next home match, Friday, July 19th, and you don't have someone in place, you're going to have some very serious questions, and that's going to be a very tough fan base to handle too, because there's all for taking your time. Yes, they're getting inundated with, people applying and everything like that, and the phone calls. I'm sure things are happening, sure. But if you don't have something in place by then, and this is really your plan, if we're just going to tread water for another week, 2 weeks, month, we're not trying to get ahead of things, but if this is where your plan is moving forward, talk about a lack of direction that we've already kind of seen, from the top. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but it's a bad trickle-down effect. That's kind of what we don't want to see continue happening. And this is kind of gauging where the fans are saying. By the way, shout out to everyone who's watching us, right? We got almost 50 of you guys watching here tonight. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. So many people, right? It's like people are angry. People are upset about how this entire situation has played out. We have Scott a little bit earlier on in the chat wants to be able to get more out of the players than they thought they could do. It's kind of harkening back to the caliber of coach that you are looking to get out of. Even Bobby right above him saying, I would have been content with a losing season after winning the championship if we had better management. They've lost the plot. I think that's where a lot of people are frustrated. And again, we will continue to get into this later in tonight's pod, but it's the optics of how this has all went down and kind of where we're led to believe the issue lies.
Absolutely. And it's a very complicated list of things. You know what? Can I address the one last comment there before we move on, because it's a little bit unrelated to some of the things. USL rumors guy mentioned Neil Collins. Any truth to that? What I will say to this, I can't tell you if there is serious contact with Neil Collins or not. I will say that to an extent, you could probably link Neil Collins to any vacancy in the league, because any team in the league would probably take him, to be perfectly frank. It's a guy who's had a lot of success, gone to a higher level. The biggest question, of course, is would he take it? And what other options are out there as well? Okay, so to Neil Collins, look, I can't tell you whether or not they're realistically going to go in for him. But I can tell you that, again, it's one of those things where I think most clubs in this league would take him if they could.
Absolutely. We will take what we can. Like we say on the screen, leave a like. Look at that handsome guy.
Look at
what Fat Kid's saying.
Do you ever wear another shirt?
What's that?
Do you ever wear another shirt?
He does
yes,
sometimes.
Yes, I have our PHNX Rising shirt as well as our PHNX Rise to the Top champion shirts. I rep our brand. There we go. But yes, leave a like, just like the screen says. Less like Fat Kid says.
I've got
48 people watching.
PHNX
11
because
likes.
I enjoy my misery in multiple
ways.
Yes,
yes, we do. Get
they
those.
tread water better than any team I've seen, Owen.
Yeah,
we can take
you
a
know what
page
it's
out of that
like.
playbook.
It's the hope that kills you. It's the hope that kills you. There.
Yeah, I mean, I can be treading water when I'm drinking it, thanks to our friends at Circle K and their Polar Pops. You can get some. Yeah, there you go. That's a noise.
Sound effects that you didn't expect.
I don't even know if people
Jacob.
got that or not, but hey, yeah, you can get a Polar Pop from Circle K. They got 79-cent Polar Pops. We are in Studio K, presented by Circle K, working on getting that Polar Pop machine installed somewhere in here.
A Polar Pop machine installed?
There's another leak. That's for later.
Max, we're getting Polar Pops. Max is getting Polar Pops. Jacob.
That's what I do
for us.
79-cent Polar Pops for the people, and of course, if you're an Inner Circle member, which is free to do so, download the Circle K app, opt in with your phone number, and you get 69-cent Polar Pops. Pretty nice deal, if you ask me. Any size, of course, it's a great time now through September 3rd. Again, 79-cent Polar Pops, 69 cents if you are an Inner Circle member. Download the Circle K app today. Opt into the Inner Circle app with just a phone number. Terms and conditions do apply. See store locations for details. Also, shout out our friends at Valley Tap Room. Valley Tap Room, is a great place to get some beers and get to enjoy, the Copa, the Euros, everything. It's in full swing.
Yeah, you may well need them at the moment, the way things are going.
Goodness gracious. Yes, there is a lot going on here with just, right, the Copa, everything going on. Make sure to check out Valley Tap Room. Valley Tap Room and what they got going on is just a phenomenal time. Get some drinks, get some slushies. The wine slushies is a great time. Check them out. 2 locations, Gilbert, Queen Creek. East Valley, if that's your cup of tea, check them out. Find them on socials at Valley Tap Room and online at valleytaproom.com.
Yeah.
All right. So listen, and again,
back to business.
Yes. And I want to encourage, right? We have a few more clips from Owain's interview with Bobby Dulle. If you have not seen the full thing, check it out. Go to our Twitter, PHNX Sports. Go to our YouTube, PHNX Sports YouTube. It's on there. Check it out again, of course, at PHNX__rising.
All of it from the beginning of the recording to the end of the recording is up there, completely unedited. So go ahead and check it out.
Exactly. It's a great watch. But I mean, right, another part of that, and again, we're talking about the fan frustration and how this whole situation came to be. This is not just from look, we're not doing poor. We're not doing well, part ways with a manager and then all is good. A lot of the frustration has come down to, where the buck is stopping, so to say, right? A lot of this club has been very much come under fire from the fan base for the recruitment process, or in many ways, lack thereof, right? We have gone on record multiple times in that this club has lost multiple players going on to different levels, guys who have gone on to other USL championship clubs. They're hard to replace. We get that from a talent standpoint, but where a lot of the issue has been is it's a perceived lack of bringing names in at all. And you discussed that a bit with Bobby.
Yeah, let's have a listen to that one.
Well, obviously, a new head coach coming in is going to face some of the same challenges that Danny did. In particular, there've obviously been questions around this club's attack. And on Friday, Brandon, Rising Sporting Director, said that part of the reason for not fully replacing some of those goals lost over the off-season was that you were giving internal players a chance to emerge and the difficulty of finding top attacking players for our level. Was that an approach that Danny agreed with when he came on board as head coach?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the roster was built collectively, and not one individual making those decisions and saying, I want this. In order to bring players in, or to retain players, there's a lot of conversations. And so you look at some of the guys when you talk about replacing, right? You're replacing, a Danny Trejo or, a Carlos Harvey. And when there's not a lot of guys. I mean, there's a reason that they've moved on to Europe and MLS, and both of them are doing really well at those levels. So it is difficult, but those guys themselves also came here last year for the first time, and I think you saw them develop and grow. So we were hopeful, and we still do feel really good about the group of guys that we have here, and yes, we wanted to see some growth from the guys that had been here. I mean, obviously there was over half the guys returned from last year, guys that knew the system, guys that have proven themselves at this level, guys that obviously ultimately brought us a championship. So as we sat down and looked at what we needed to bring in the off season, we wanted guys that could collectively make us stronger. We went out and we purchased Giulio from Juventus. I think that was, it showed our intention and some of the qualities that Giulio has. We brought in some wingbacks, some Rito. He was an all-league wingback, right? Remy, yes, we got him on loan from Colorado Rapids. He was a Golden Boot winner last year at the MLS Next Pro level. He's played at the USL Championship level. JP, one of the best players consistently year over year at the League One level. And then you add pieces like Lawrence White, who's been a proven player and someone who I think has tremendous ceiling in Pop Marboy, and to the group to strengthen the group. So collectively, yes, we felt really good going into the season. And again, these guys all have quality, and I think they've shown moments and flashes. But consistently across 90 minutes, consistently from game to game, it hasn't been the case. And perhaps a new voice, some different ideas, some different concepts will help. And perhaps we'll see a change. And that's what we're hoping for, and the reason we made the change.
So you say this is a collective decision. Does that mean then that since Danny became head coach, he hadn't come to you with, one or more names of potential signings that he was asking club management to add early or prior to the season?
No, we've constantly looked to add pieces. I mean, we have been all off season. We have been all during the season. We continue to look to add pieces that we think could come here and raise the level. I mean, we did it last year. We brought Panos in midway through the season. We brought Formella in. We had to, move some pieces out at that point. So we're going to continue to do that. Names have been presented internally. Sometimes we go after someone and for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. It takes multiple parties sometimes to get a deal done. So yes, we've discussed names that have been brought up through scouts, have been presented to us from other organizations from around the world, names that have come up through data. Our process hasn't changed, and we present those names and we filter those names and we bring them to the coaching staff to ultimately say, yep, let's go get that player. And there's been players we've tried to go get that we didn't have success with. And there's also been players that the staff, has brought up and said, hey, let's consider this player. Can we do it? And we go through the process and we haven't brought, a new person in, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to. We're going to continue to try to do that and push the existing guys and also try to bring guys in that may have some different characteristics that can bring something different to the table.
So there's a lot there. What do you make of it?
We kind of split it into some different parts, right? So one of the things I think, something that Bobby has brought up in general about the idea of like they've really gone at it and been aggressive in the transfer market. He listed some players. I'm going to quote this one from John Morrissey. You probably know him on Twitter as USL Tactics. He's currently over on the USL show. Thank you for joining us and not them, but you can probably go listen to what they've had to say about this situation because he has some really good insights on the footballing side of things. So make sure to pay attention to John, right? We love him. We've had him on the show a few times. Here's what he said in response to some of the comments that Bobby made on sorry, Jacob, you're jumping the gun a little bit here. Sorry. I'm going to read out something.
Sorry, I took the eye contact as a yes.
I took the eye contact as a yes. No, but this is what John Morrissey had to say on this. Dulle's implication that signing Dariusz was a midfield salve or that adding the famously defense optional if electric Edgardo Rito would help the transition is cover your ass double speak. That's what was published by John Morrissey today. Again, there's comments in there that I just feel like... And to get into that one very specifically, right? Dariusz, is he ambitious perhaps in some ways going after him? Yeah, I'd agree with that. Mm-hmm. Is he someone who's only ever played in the lower levels at a senior level now in Italy? Yes. He's young. He's a risk. And there's a difference there between... And I saw one of the comments in there earlier in our chat was saying about, is he trying to claim that we developed Trejo?
Yeah.
And the answer there is you can't really claim that, right? Because this is a guy who, when he came into the fanfare. People knew he hadn't done it in terms of as a team. He'd done it as an individual. He had already come in with enough individual achievement within this league in particular that it didn't feel like you were bringing in an unknown quantity. The difference with bringing someone like Dariusz in is you're bringing a young guy, taking him way away from home, and he could turn out to be all right.
Sure.
Or he might not. But you have to kind of balance those things.
Yeah, I think a lot of this, right, is... It's not even necessarily like apples to apples, right? In the sense of like, listen, bring in Julio, the recruitment process and everything like that. If you're looking to kind of grow that talent, bring in someone younger, I don't have an issue with that. Like, sure, that's applauded. At the time, we thought, hey, this is an ambitious move, bringing someone in. Like, we applauded it. That's all well and good. You can't look to just go in for the high price of the flashy, shiny object. Look at this. Look at what we're doing. But then fail to stock up on, gee, we've lost a lot here, and let's actually not refill it with the right people, with the right personnel. That, I think, is where the disconnect and where the issue is.
Yeah. I'll address it now, but another comment in there. Kevin, what's Dariusz up to these days? He's 32, by the way. Just for a bit of comment there in that one. But look, it's understandable, I think, that when you're going to play a certain way with wingbacks, you're going to look to be a bit more vertical, which is what this team, according to Bobby, wanted to do. The idea of going, I think, for verticality without having people who can win the ball in the air as well. I'm not saying verticality is lumping it, because it isn't always.
Yeah.
You kind of got to have that option a bit as well, don't you? I mean, again, why are you going to look to exploit wide areas if you don't have someone you can whip it into? Why? I mean, and this team's crossing from open play has been poor.
Gosh,
we know that, right? And a large part of that is because they don't have a real obvious target to aim for. And that brings us on quite nicely, I think, to the talk about the striker, right? And this one, now Jacob, finally. A little bit premature as he punches the air now that he's got it at the right time. Here's a quote. Obviously, Bobby starts by saying things about how this team, the executives, obviously, and that would be more of the, the collective as a whole, as he frequently kind of referred to.
Sure.
Would sometimes put names forward. He also said this. There's also been players that the staff has brought up and said, hey, let's consider this player and say, can we do it? We go through the process and we haven't brought a new person in, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to. We're going to continue to try to do that and push the existing guys, and also try to bring in guys that may have some different characteristics that can bring something different to the table. So, look, as we get into that, I feel as though it kind of matches what we've heard, right? Which is that there was an understanding, I believe, among the staff earlier in this process than, say, leadership and club management, that there were holes in this team.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised at that. We could see there were holes in this team. It doesn't take a whole lot to realize that, yes, the eyes don't really deceive in a case like this. Okay? Sometimes the eye test works as well, or at least should be ringing alarm bells. They haven't brought anyone in yet. They say they're not kind of ruling out bringing anyone in, but then that, to me, gets into this awkward conflict here, right? Whereby you've got, on the one hand, somehow this is Danny's fault and therefore Danny must go because they've been underperforming. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the players here aren't enough, so you need new players in as well. Do you see where this is awkward to me? There's a conflict here. It's not, and there's always a bit of both. There always will be in every scenario. But it does also, and I think this is an important one, if Rising gets a new coach in and they've given him one or two new players, you can't then say that the coaching change itself was a success, because we will never know what Danny Stone would have been able to do with those same one or two new players. And that's a really important part of this. He never got the opportunity. We knew that Brandon McCarthy, as sporting director of this team, was plugging about how they were busy with, it's a few weeks away from the transfer window. And to be clear, it's a bit more than 2 weeks if they're talking about international deals, because it's not coming till the 18th of July. The 18th of July is, to my understanding, when the FIFA transfer matching system opens, which allows you to go in for those international transfer certificates and get players moved from one country to another. But you're still going after that, but you felt the need that now was the time instead, though, to bin off Danny as head coach. And I don't know. It's a complicated one, isn't it? It's a complicated one. And
it is.
We know there have been holes in the recruitment. You can't argue, quite frankly, any attempt to argue that there weren't mistakes. Whether you want to try and justify them or not is a different question. But there have been mistakes made in the recruitment.
There very much has been. Again, we kind of talked about it, a bit earlier, and even within previous episodes of, right, there is a difference between when you're going in, Juan Guerra's head coach, going into the 2023 season, the roster is completely overhauled. You're backing him with players. You give it time to develop. And even though that season had its bumps and some slowness in the road, there was slowly an identity being forged. And there was not perfect harmony. We fully never know what's going on behind the scenes, but right, there is at least more cohesiveness between manager coming in, what they're looking for, and being backed by the recruitment team to an extent. That's what we saw last season, both in the offseason 2023 and then even with the midseason additions of right guys like a Panos, guys like a Dariusz. You then have the timing of right again. This is where it doesn't necessarily like you can't. People can point to yes, Danny Stone was appointed late and everything like that, and that's that is one part of it. But the other thing is too is this club was not really bolstered from that number 9 position from those other key areas, right? We always say that is a number 9 going to help this team dramatically? Yes, we've beat that point to death, but it's also to the point where it's not just necessarily one player away or anything like that. There are some fundamental gaps within this roster. And if you are now searching in the pantry for something at a mid-season point, it's just very tough to do that and consistently bank on those mid-season ones kind of bringing you up.
Well, there's the thing, right? So I'd imagine a large part of the reason why they're having to look and having to wait now is because there's not going to be a whole lot of people in USL available right now. Why? Because as you look at the current standings, everything is so tight. Everyone feels like they're in a shot. No one is selling right now. Sure. Why would they have to?
Right.
No one feels a need right now to sell. No one is languishing at the bottom and feeling as though, we're not going to do it this year. Maybe we offload some cash, get some young players and see what they can do. No one is feeling the need to do that. And so you're waiting because you're looking for people I think who've probably been out of contract elsewhere. Or maybe you pay a transfer fee, but I don't know if they will. It's messy, I think, trying to rely on these mid-season acquisitions. And again, it comes back to the fact that sometimes you can hand a list of players off to people. Maybe they don't pursue them too quickly. And you end up eventually where people don't ultimately become available at the times that you want and need them to be available. You can be looking for them earlier and maybe they're available then, and then if you wait a little bit and they're gone.
Yeah.
Good players don't hang around on the market for long.
No.
Good players do not. You have to be ready to sign them when they're available. You have to be in those positions. Mid-season doesn't always work. Doesn't always work.
You don't want to, especially within these mid-season things where it's not just kind of, again, what we saw last season, where it is a bit of sharpening up or, hey, we're a piece away or things like that. You're going to that looking for a retool, and if something happens, fantastic. If it doesn't, okay, you still have a good core. If you're going into a mid-season, I mean, heck, any window, but especially a mid-season one where you're going in with a bit of desperation, it's not going to go well. That's not a position of leverage you want to go in through. And I think that kind of leads into, we have the last video that I know you kind of wanted to queue up of.
It's a shorter one, this one,
It is a shorter one, yes. But you talked to Bobby a bit about, right, we've been mentioning there's stuff that needs to be sorted out through the front office level, knowing that there's a bit of discrepancy of where we're talking
leave it at the simple. Leave it at the simple, right? Which is that what's changing now Danny's gone. Let's have a listen to what Bobby had to say.
With Danny now gone, beyond just on the coaching side, are there any other changes that you're looking to implement to the club's processes?
Not at the moment. No. I mean, obviously we're going to continue down this pathway. We felt like we were, as I mentioned, the process had stalled. In some cases had been going backwards as it relates to the evolution of what you're seeing on the field. But for us, no, we're going to continue to stick to our process. We're not going to make decisions rashly. We're going to, when we're recruiting players, we're going to, continue to use all of the people that we've brought in from analysts, like I've mentioned, to calling on references, calling other players that have played with those players. So everything from that perspective is going to continue forward, and we don't have all the answers. We're going to continue to reach out to clubs and learn from them and speak to them to see how they're implementing processes so we can continue to improve.
Yeah. Look, this is something that is, I think when you contrast it with his previous responses, concerning to me. And I think it's something that's been concerning to the fans as well. We'll get into fan reaction a lot later on this. Not that there's like much left of the show, but we will get into that later. It's concerning to me because I think that we had an entire interview building up where it was collectively we do this, collectively we do that. We come together as a group, we do all this together. And yet what we're at now is a position where the team has faltered. and the majority of the expectation of accountability has fallen on one person. There is more than one person that is responsible for the current situation that the club finds itself in. There are multiple people right now that you could turn to, look at, and question. And the overwhelming feeling from the fan base, and quite frankly, listening to that interview back myself, one of the main takeaways I get from this is that the group will make decisions collectively and they will pin it on the head coach if things go wrong. If you are a coach with ambition looking at that, I think you need to think twice before considering taking this job. If you are one of the people at the moment in the front office who is part of this collective, you need to think about the way that that's leaving you being perceived. Earlier this season, Brandon McCarthy, as sporting director, did an interview with Backheeled with Joe Lowry, another friend of the pod that we've had on here before. And in that interview, it was said that Brandon didn't think that the lack of experience that he had in this sport, on or off the field, had impacted on his credibility as a sporting director. However, as we get into now a position where the club is faltering on the field, and it appears that Brandon McCarthy, with a lack of experience, with his position as part of the ownership of this team, is one of those people that, at least the illusion from the image from the outside, is that he is ducking accountability and it's being all shoveled on to somebody else, to, in this case, a rookie head coach 6 months into their appointment, and that the failings there are being moved on over there. The question then is, we can see that the fans, despite his assertion, don't take him as seriously as I think he thinks he should. And the question really is, should he be taken as a sporting director and not just as an owner saying that they are a sporting director as seriously as he wants to be taken? Because if you're in a position where a sporting director would be questioned and should be questioned about the direction that their team is going in, and you're in a position where to the outside world, it feels as though they aren't being questioned in, then you have a problem. Then you have a very serious problem of image that the club, I think, quite frankly, needs to address.
Well said. It is, and that honestly brings up two good points, things that, we've discussed. That, number one, we understand that, the game is different, that people are hiring on within sporting director positions, within scouting departments. It is taking a more of an analytical approach. We understand that is what Brandon McCarthy very much brings to the table, but it is very fair to raise the question of, he's someone who doesn't. It's
not just analytics, is it? He's the sporting director. What does that job entail? What should that job be? If you're the sporting director at almost any club, that means that you are the highest person on the sporting side.
You are overseeing everything.
Save for the person who's your boss, effectively, is the president, the chairman, the chief executive, whatever your relative club wants to call them. But the sporting director is setting the agenda for things above the head coach.
Agreed.
That's a very serious responsibility.
Yes.
And again, to give the image, at least to the outside world, that you are doing it with minimal experience with minimal accountability, that just sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. It's a very potent mix. That's exactly it. It is not having the experience from a soccer perspective. It is having could say lack of accountability is a fair way to put it. I'd also say the safe fall, the nest, the safety net, if you will, of being part of the ownership group. And also in just how we have heard from this club of, it's the lack of reading the room. It's a lack of reading the room. It's a lack of understanding, you need to be able to have a little bit of the egoless to it.
Even from a player's side, right? We hear this a lot, and a lot of the times it happens where players will get into rows with managers, head coaches who haven't played the game, and they'll come out with things like, you just don't understand it. This is a guy above that position who's also just doesn't have the track record to be even able to point to and say, right, I didn't play the game, but I worked under this guy. I worked under this guy. I spent years and years and years and years of my life working in positions that train me specifically for this in this sport.
Sure.
And that's the key thing here. It just feels a little bit absurd. There's a process to be in something that feels like, and again, I think Brett is kind of is pretty much correct here. If there was an experienced soccer guy in charge, you could see a scenario where someone like Brandon could have a role, but without that, you can end up in situations like this. I think it's a very valid point. Again, the majority of people who don't play the game, when they get into this sport and they find themselves in those positions, they have to work their way up.
It takes time.
They have to work under people and
100%.
gain experience and gain knowledge and pick those things up. And obviously, there's always new knowledge. Obviously, there's always new things that you want to bring in. But there's just a lot at play there that when things go badly wrong, there's a real risk that they get quite nasty. Like I think they are now.
A lot of it kind of boils down to ego in a lot of ways, right? Like that's what it is. Being able to know you can do the job and thinking that you can rise before it, ahead of people and processes where you don't just step into kind of roles like this just because you are an owner or things like that.
Exactly. It's quick, very, very quickly before you move on a little bit here. Brian, I'm curious how difficult it is to recruit players with this negative public perception. That's the real reason we don't have strikers. But the negative public perception has come very recently. Very recently. It feels as though things have been falling off a cliff in a much shorter time period.
I think there's
always a little undercurrent, but it's an undercurrent. It's been an undercurrent, and especially people who have been around this club for a while, who have seen the rumblings. It's always kind of been there, but it's okay. Good play on the pitch, everything like that. It kind of brushes up. It was no different than the undercurrent this club has had for years.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
There have been elements of it for years.
That's what I'm saying. When the club has been, playing well over years, and of course, when was the last times it really has spiked? It's now, and this is probably the worst it's been. And a couple of years ago, right, when we're in this situation looking for a new manager to take over the club, someone you don't have to look to take over. Friends at Four Peaks, that is the beer of choice for you. You don't have to worry about trying to find someone else and kind of scratching your head on who's going to help make that decision for you. You got it right there in front of you. Four Peaks, they have their Bad Birdie Juicy Golden Ale. Saw a couple people drinking it last night at the U.S. Uruguay watch party at their A Street pub last night. We're not going to get into that. Thank goodness there's bigger things to talk about because that was a disaster. But Four Peaks and their Bad Birdie Juicy Golden Ale is certainly not a disaster. Check it out wherever you want to get their beer. Of course, their A Street Bum in Tempe is a great place to take a look at it, but you also can follow them at Four Peaks Pub and at Four Peaks Brew to keep up with the latest and greatest going on. Arizona's hometown brewery. Of course, you must be 21 years or older to enjoy responsibly. All right, Owen, we've covered a lot that you've gotten into with your interview with Phoenix Rising President Bobby Dulle. There's some stuff that we still need to talk through that, kind of came out during the interview a bit and then the proceeding after the fact.
And before. We need to talk a bit about the fan reaction, I think, to this. And the fact is it's been almost uniformly negative.
Yeah.
I asked Bobby about that in the interview. He said about how, we always say when people stop caring, that's when you've got a real problem. But the issue here, this isn't people not caring or not caring. The issue here is people very much not caring for you.
Yeah.
I think is the most polite way of putting it when you look at some of the comments, when you look at some of the, I'll leave it at expletive-laced comments at times that are being left in many of these places. Yeah. It is bad. This fan energy right now is incredibly negative. I think probably the most negative I have ever seen it. And I've been around this club for too long at this point. So, look, people there have always been people who didn't like Bobby Dulle. as club president, as general manager, that's always kind of been there. There's always been that little undercurrent. You get that, right? You get that. It happens sometimes when you're in a senior position. But even, I mean, I look at this club to its most toxic otherwise, it's probably around the Rick stuff. And even then, it always felt like there was more. There was more to that. There was two sides, two real sides. This doesn't feel like two sides. The two sides here feels more like, who are you focusing on? Is it Bobby or is it Bobby and Brandon? There's so much negativity. There's so much just aggression, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, the club is lucky to a degree, I think, still, that it doesn't have a home game for a while. To an extent, this will peter out. I'm not sure how much of it will peter out. Because this is bad.
I'm very curious what the reaction's going to be during that Friday, July 19th match.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I'll also add that even from our perspective, we have heard more things that still haven't been talked about yet. About the entire process, about where this is going. Look, it's a long slog even to get to that next game. There will be another game in the middle, away from home at San Antonio. Then there will be a weekend off before they come back in. How that aggression will carry on, I don't know. The other bit of news that we did have from today, of course, one of the other questions, we didn't bring it up in today's show. One of the questions there about, obviously, player grumbles about things like IV treatments, food, and the perceived cost cutting around that. Yeah. From what we gather, the club is not feeling great about the fact that those leaks are happening, as one of our commenters, I'm sure, will take great glee in the fact this is now the topic. Multiple sources telling us about situation around training today where players were effectively threatened by club management over leaks that have happened. So we will see how that develops from here. Obviously not a particularly positive development, but I do, looking at this from the outside, feels to me as though creating a story out of a semi-story is probably not the wisest decision to go, and probably gives you a glimpse into the state of the club at the moment. But we will see. Look, there is just an incredibly strong negative vibe around almost anything to do with this club at the moment. And I wish them luck in the coaching search. But again, if I was someone interested in this job, what is one of the first things you do for? You start looking around, get the lay of the land. That's not just the stuff that you'd see at surface level from a distance. That's not just the stuff that you're going to get from management at the team. And then you start looking at things like this. And you start looking about what people are saying about the team. And you start looking at what people are saying about the way that ownership or that team leadership are acting. I mean, it's a negative. It's a definite negative. Yeah. Again, right? I mean, we touched on Brandon McCarthy earlier. Obviously, he's a baseball guy working in football now, as a sporting director for his first real job in football, to be honest. I mean, you look at that Bobby Dulle, who many people don't always have the most positive things to say about. A lot of players aren't always the biggest fans of him. Former, present, whatever. You have a chief executive that is a practicing plastic surgeon. Maybe these people have skills, but on the face of it, I don't know. Wow, that was an episode of the PHNX Rising podcast.
It sure was. Yeah, man. It's, a lot of this stuff, again, if you've been following us for a while, if you've been following the club for a while, some of this stuff may be new to you. Some of this stuff may just be a refresher, but given everything that's happened, it's very much coming to light, and some things are coming to light in newer, more profound, and certainly a bit more flashing kind of in your face way. So think we'll leave it at that. Appreciate you, everyone, joining us here on the PHNX Rising podcast. Of course, you can follow us along with any other news, any other updates, sharing some stuff from this episode at PHNX__rising.
No, we're not doing this. We're not doing the bit.
I got nothing for double the whatever. You can follow me on Twitter at Max David Simpson. You can follow Owain on Twitter at OJ Evans 18. You can follow producer Jacob at Jacob_Franklin 4. Yeah, sick. Got it. Awesome. Really appreciate everyone joining us. There was a ton of you here in the chat. Appreciate everyone commenting, chatting, liking. Keep up with us. We're going to bring everything to you. And it is a beautiful game, but it's absolutely way more beautiful when we don't have to talk about this. Good night, everyone.
We all silly like the mayor.